Fashion Institute of Technology. This will be an interview with Mr. Irving Rubinstein, Sr., known to everybody as Mr. Ruby, Sr. Mr. Ruby and his brother acquired Braetan, of which he was the head until his retirement in 1981. 1980. This interview takes place on April 23rd, 1982. Mr. Ruby, would you tell us first where you were born and how you got into this business?
Sure. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, but I was only there for a very short period. We came back to New York, and I was educated in the schools of Borough Manhattan, and then in Brooklyn. And then I went to NYU, New York University, School of Commerce. I went there for 2 years in the daytime and got my prerequisite for law school. At that time, there was only 2 years required. And because the Depression set in, and my dad couldn't afford to send me to day school anymore, so as a result, I got a job in the Bank of America. At that time, the Bank of America had branches in New York City. And I entered Brooklyn Law School.
Had you mentioned that your grandfather or your father was in the fur business?
My father was in the fur business, yes. He was a manufacturer of muskrat fur coats. And during the summer months, during inter-college recess, I would take some coats over my arm and go into the market and sell the jobbers, because we were manufacturers. I sell a muskrat coat for $165. I think you know how much they are now.
What year was this, incidentally, and how old were you?
Well, I was 17 and 18, so what would that make it?
When were you born?
I was born in 1908.
1908, so this was about 1925, 26.
Right. And
but that was just a way of earning some money and being helpful.
I was just trying to help my dad out.
Right.
Because he was struggling, and I opened up those big jobs of Kruskal and B. Order and Sons, and they were the biggest furriers at that time on 7th Avenue. But I wasn't too happy with the fur business, and my father's ambition for me was to become a lawyer. However, as I started in the bank as a messenger boy, in the meantime, I was going to college at night at Brooklyn Law School, studying law, and I got involved in the bank. I was, as I said, as a messenger boy, and then I was in the bookkeeping department, then I was a teller, and then I went in the credit department, and I was getting to like it. And I thought to myself, well, maybe now I'll become a banker. And because at that time, my friends of mine who graduated law school were making $5 a week as a clerk. $5 a week. So I said I couldn't foresee an immediate future with making money. So, and I was starting to keep company with my wife. So I said to myself, well, I think I'll quit law school in the middle of my second year term. I went, we go to January, then we start the second term. I quit law school in the middle of perpetuities, which is a good time to quit. And I decided to go back to NYU at night and major in bank and finance and get my degree there so that I would have good prerequisites for the Bank of America as a banker, aspiring to become an officer. So I stayed there, and I enjoyed it very much, and I enjoyed the credit work and all that sort of thing. And then the bank merged. The Bank of America decided to leave New York area and remain only in California, which they did. They're the biggest bank in California. And the night of the merger, they fired me. They fired. They fired me. So here I was, and that was a period when there was a failure of the Bank of the United States, if you remember, which was the biggest Jewish bank in New York City, and they went bankrupt. I got a tremendous, beautiful letter of recommendation from the vice president, and 3 months pay in advance, the termination pay. And I went down to different banks. I went to Wall Street. I went all over. I could not get another job. They just wouldn't hire me. And here I was in my senior term then. By that time, I was in my senior term at NYU, almost getting my degree. So I used to handle the S. Klein account on 14th Street.
For the bank?
For the bank. So I went to Mr. Klein, and he said he'd talk to me, and I explained my position, and I said I'd like to make a career in retailing. And he said, well, I'll have to start you at the very bottom. If you're willing to start at the very bottom, okay. So they started me picking hangers off the floor for $11 a week. All right? And I started there, and I started to make progress there too. I started to go in the receiving department, and I started to be in charge of the girls, and then a manager of a floor, and then I became assistant manager we opened up an annex building. They had a main building, and then they had an annex building, and I became like assistant manager, and I worked there, and then they made me and then I didn't care to be in the administrative department. I wanted to be in merchandising. So they made me an assistant buyer. And I started working with the merchandise manager, who was a very bright man, and we went around and we priced all the merchandise in the receiving department. We had a bill, the buyer who bought it, the cost of it, and we put the selling price on it. Dresses, coats, suits, children's, you name it, we priced them. And I really learned an awful lot from this man.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
they were already down on 14th Street,
Oh,
right?
sure.
So that what you're saying really is that by the late 20s, 14th Street was already a major shopping
It
street.
was a major shopping street. Sure, it was S. Klein and Auerbach's. And we did $30 million in one store. $30 million. They're the biggest, at that time, they were the largest discount store in the country. Because nobody was jumping on it yet. It was new. And they were just fabulous. So I'm trying to think now. And then they made me a boys. I bought boys clothing, boys snowsuits, boys hats, boys jackets, things like that. We never had that department. I opened that up, and we did about $2 million the first year in that department. And I, in turn, went to Ambassador Company, which was the forerunner of Braetan and Sam Silverstein and Braefair.
It was a forerunner of Sam.
Forerunner. It was called Ambassador Company, and they were selling these items.
How do you spell it?
Ambassador.
Oh, Ambassador. Excuse me.
Ambassador Company,
Okay,
yeah.
fine. All right, I'm sorry.
Owned by the Silversteins.
Right.
A great merchandise family who were very bright and who knew how to merchandise diversified items like blouses, sportswear, bathing suits, hats, boys' clothing. It's unbelievable what they would do. And I bought from them closeouts. And they were sort of impressed. There was a lot of politics in that. By the way, there was a lot of politics in the S. Klein store, just like in every department store. And I felt that I reached the top position and that it was just a question of time that I would have to make a move. I didn't want to remain a clothing buyer because I knew that many buyers uprooted themselves and went from one city to another city to make a living, and I didn't care for that. I wanted to, at that time, thinking of staying in New York because I had just gotten married, and my family lived there, and I didn't want to move. So I said to myself, well, I'd like to get a job some other place. So when Mr. Silberstein approached me and said to me, anytime you want to hang your hat in my showroom, you can. I would get your position as a salesman. Now, his salesmen at that time were making anywhere from $75 a week to $125 a week, which was much different than what I was making, $28 a week as a buyer. So it was the height of depression. So I thought it would be a very wise move on my part. And in the meantime, I graduated college and got my degree in banking and finance. And took a job with them, and they were breaking me in to become a salesman. Now, I just didn't know whether I was going to be in the showroom there or what was going to. They had 10 salesmen traveling on the road, covering the whole United States. Now, I never left New York, and I didn't know what to think.
Where was this showroom, which handles this?
We were on 20 West 36th Street.
And you handled this big diversity of
Diversity,
lines.
yes, yes. And they shipped from there. They had a big place, a tremendous place, and did big business. So we were not well known, but the salesmen were such good salesmen that they were able to open up all kinds of accounts throughout the country. Specialty stores, mostly specialty stores, and a few department stores.
Do you remember, or do you know when Ambassador Company was founded?
Ambassador Company was founded in, I would say, in the early 1900s.
And was it further downtown than when you
Yes,
worked there?
it used to be on Lower Broadway.
On Lower Broadway.
Lower Broadway, and then they came to Uptown, which they called Uptown, 36th Street.
Right.
Because that was the millinery district at that time, if you remember.
Yes.
And that's why they opened up there.
Because millinery was one of their very
Millinery was
important-
one of their important merchandise that they were selling. And they wanted to be in the millinery district. So we started there. But I didn't start with them until, let me get my figures straight, 1933, I think.
Just after the worst part of the Depression.
After the panic, about 1933, it still was a high depression.
Yeah, right.
And they started me at $50 a week, and they broke me in, learning the merchandise, the type of merchandise they have, how they sell it, and what they do. And then they were teaching me how to drive a car. They bought me a Chevrolet, and then they decided to either send me to the South or to New England. Now, when I heard the South, I thought I was on my way to Europe. So I said, no, I'd rather go to New England, so I figured I at least could come home for weekends. I didn't want to be away from home that long. So they gave me all the small towns in New England, in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. And that's how I started.
Pretty cold climates.
Well, not only pretty cold climate, but I was extremely nervous and apprehensive. And I started to sell, and as soon as I hit Greenwich, I opened up the first account, which we still have in our business, Chancey Dealey, the first account I
Could
went
you
into
spell that?
Chancy, CHANCY, D'Elia.
Thank you.
She's still in business, and we still sell them. And I went to Stanford and opened up Mantle and Martin, and they're still in business. And I went so forth and so on, Norwalk, all the way up the line, you know? But I didn't go to the big cities like, they didn't let me go to New Haven or Hartford or Springfield or Boston. They had a different salesman for that. And I just covered the small towns. Well, within a period of 2 years, I tripled my business. You know, I opened up many accounts.
Were you working on commission in those days?
No, I was still working on salary. I was still working on salary. By this time, I was making 75.
Because roadmen do mostly work on commission.
Yes,
do they
they
not?
were, yes. But since I just started and they
Yeah,
were breaking me in,
yeah.
they put me on salary. But, and this continued for a period of years. And they started to diversify into other channels of merchandise. And then, I want to get the period straight, they decided to go into the ladies' suit business, suits, which was just beginning to make us some kind of a get some recognition from the women throughout our country. And they went into it with Ben Ginsberg, who used to be, I know the name, I think it was Ben Ginsberg Company. They made better merchandising, suits and coats. And they opened up this division called Passarelli, who was in charge of the factory in Brooklyn. We opened up a tremendous plant in Brooklyn. We made man-tailored suits in worsted fabrics and gabardines.
And
Shetlands.
was he a contractor then?
Passarelli?
Owned by you?
No.
Owned by the firm?
Silberstein and Ginsberg
Mhm.
owned the company,
Uh-huh.
and they opened up this division,
Called Passarelli.
and they gave it to us. They gave it to the salesman, in addition to the other lines that we had. And we started to go out on the road to project suits. And needless to say, it became we were selling worsted suits, Stillwater's worsted, sharkskins, gabardines for $10.75, let's say,
With anticipation.
and making profit. All right. So and they made those suits like a man tailored with section work, you know, with felt in the lapels and the collars, tailored. The tailoring was impeccable, and they just walked out naturally. Of course, later on we had to raise the prices as it went along. You know, 14 to 1975 to 24. Needless to say, and today I think the same suit is probably $120 wholesale. You know. But that was the beginning of the suit history, and women had maybe 8 or 10 suits in their wardrobe. It was a very big thing. And then we'd make holiday suits, pastels, and things like that. Now, for spring, the funny part is that the spring season was the big season for suits. Every woman would buy a suit for spring in those days. It isn't like today. The big season for our industry in coats and suits is in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
But in those days, in the spring, suits were tremendous. So that was, we'd work 7 months, 8 months, and then stop for 4 months and do nothing. So, but that was the beginning of the suit business, and which was the forerunner for us to go into the coat business. In the meantime, we also developed sport jackets. We formed a
This is
company,
still under the
all under
Ambassador name?
Ambassador. We formed McMurray Jackets. They were beautiful fabrics, smoking plaids in those days, and checks and stripes, bold stripes, and in beautiful colorings, you know, yellows and purples and camels and things like that. And we were selling those jackets for $8.75 and $10.75, which was thought of extremely high price, but which the better stores all put in. And they sold them, did very well. So that was another phase, see? And we all carried these lines. And then they decided to go into suits in a different fashion. The brothers split up. So they broke up Passarelli, and they formed
The two Silverstein
the two
brothers?
Silverstein brothers. There were 4 Silverstein brothers,
Uh-huh.
and they split up. 2 brothers kept Ambassador, and one brother opened up Joselli, the other brother opened up, the 2 brothers opened up Joselli, and 2 brothers remained in Ambassador. And then the 2 brothers split Joselli, and one opened up Braetan. And that
Uh-huh.
was the beginning of Braetan.
What year was that about?
That had to be about 1940, I would say it was in the early 1940s.
Before the Second World War?
Yes.
Yeah, just
Before
do
the,
that.
before the Second World War, yes. Yes.
So now
The
there you
very
were,
beginning.
right.
Beginning.
And you went with them.
At that time, I was already doing all the big cities. They gave me all the big cities. They gave me all of New England and New York State territory. So I made the trade shows, and I was on the road at least 46 weeks a year. But I was home on weekends. Came back on Friday, and would start out Monday morning. See? In the meantime, at that time, my kid brother finished high school and was starting college, Ruby Jr., and
Now, why was he
At-
called Ruby Jr.? He's your brother.
Well, when I brought him to work in my place, and his name was Irving Rubinstein, and they were calling me Irving Rubinstein, Mr.
Although your name was
Silverstein,
really,
Isidore, Mr. Silverstein said, look, this is ridiculous. You're senior, and he's junior. So everybody called us senior and junior. They never even called us anything else. Even my children are calling me senior now instead of dad. So I took my brother in, and we broke him into the shipping department. And then I went to Mr. Silverstein and I said, look, I said, you know what a good salesman I am. I said, this territory is wide open in the South and the Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington. Why didn't you give him a chance? Just let him try to go out there for a trip and see what happens. And they said, okay. I think he was about 19, 18, something like that. And they sent him out. And he did well from immediately, as soon as he went on the road. Because I took him with me first on a trip to New England to show him what I do and how I do it. And then he went out to the South. Then he was drafted in the Army. So he took a leave of absence from the place. He went in the Army. And when he came back, I talked to Mr. Silverstein to give him Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington. And then he did real business. By the time he got started and I got started, I was shipping $1 million in New England. He was shipping $1 million in the mid-Atlantic states. I went to the boss and said, look, my brother and I are going to form a partnership, Rubinstein Brothers, sales partnership. Put us on commission. We don't want any more salary. See? And I'll be in the showroom when he's on the road, and he'll be in the showroom when I'm on the road, so that our customers will always be serviced. In the meantime, I said to my brother, look, whoever comes in, although every man that has a territory would only wait on his own people from his respective territory. But I told my brother, you wait on, if you're free, wait on everybody, so you get to learn the whole country. And I'll do the same. And who knows, sometimes in the future, maybe things will happen. We may go in business. See? So I had that in the back of my mind as far as aspiring to becoming a boss. And we worked it up, and we did very well. And we were the most...
working as a partnership.
As a partnership.
Within the...
We combined our
within the
territories,
Silverstein's business.
and we made a lot of money in those days, in the 50s. And then, lo and behold, Mr. Silverstein died. the gentleman, the president died, and the two sons who were Dartmouth graduates came in and took over the business, and they were really inclined to be academic, and they were not inclined.
This was Braetan.
This was Braetan, and we called it Sam Silverstein Company. That time we took his name and we formed Sam Silverstein Corporation, because Joe Silverstein, his brother, left and formed Joe Selly Suits.
Right.
So they were competition.
By now you no longer had anything to do with the millinery.
No, no
children's
more
wear.
millinery, no more sportswear, no more blouses.
You were
None of that
strictly
stuff.
in,
Strictly in coats and suits.
and you were at that point.
But
in
we hadn't made any
vaudeville.
coats yet.
Oh,
We hadn't made any coats yet. We made one coat, a Chesterfield coat. When the Chesterfield coat came out, the man-tailored coat, we were terrific at that, because we were a man-tailored factory. So we made Chesterfield coats, and every woman had a Chesterfield coat with a velvet collar.
now did you use a designer to make that one coat, or how'd you acquire the model?
What they did is, they had like they called him a designer, but actually he just interpreted silhouettes that he'd get from, they'd buy silhouettes. And
Buy sketches?
Or buy sketches, or go in the stores and buy, garments. And he was a copyist.
Yes, right.
But after all, it was all classic merchandise.
Sure.
The suits were all three-button classic, cardigan classic, or a convertible classic.
Who selected the fabrics?
The boss did. And they also had a piece goods man. And they would select colors, and we used to work with Mr. American Woolen Mills and Mr. Silver in those days, and all the top mills. So,
Paul Honig. Did you go to that price range?
No, we didn't go to that price range. No, we were more popular price. Because the suits at that time, I think, by that time they were $19.75, $24.75.
So it was Hockenham, maybe, and American.
Yes, American Woolen, Stevens,
right,
people like
right.
that. Peerless. And then the fad for suits was starting to wane. And from $10 million that we did just in suits alone, we went down to about $2 million.
And what year was that, Jeff? Approximately.
About 1953, 52. See what I mean? And because sportswear was coming in very
Yes,
strong.
right.
When sportswear was coming in very strong,
Suits were going
with
up.
skirts and jackets, it took away, and sweaters, it took away from suits. So as a result, the Silverstein boys, who had plenty of money, didn't want to keep losing money. And in the meantime, many of the salesmen left, either went in business for themselves or got different positions. But my brother and I were made vice presidents of the company. We carried the bulk of the business for that period that was so bad. We did most of the selling. Without us, they wouldn't have had any selling. So they decided they were going to go out of the business and go into something else, and they offered the company to us. Now, it was a big company. We were on the third floor. We had a whole floor, and it was something to think about, to ponder, because we could have gotten a job, my brother and I could have gotten a job with a number of top people as a selling agent and make big money. But our accountant said, look, if you take a job as a salesman, you will remain a salesman, and you won't have the opportunity to become a manufacturer. It may be tough at the beginning, but the future could be very bright, and you could build up something good. So this is your opportunity to buy, and I would recommend that you buy. So we bought the company for $110,000. There were 4 partners. We got a production man, another salesman, our brother and myself. We put in $27,500 each. And that's how we started. And that's 28 years ago we bought the business. Now we are in the business and we know that we've got to get in the coat picture. Now the retailer doesn't need us for coats, he's got all coat resources, unless we can make a niche for ourselves. So in those days, junior petite dresses were very big, and Macy's was doing a tremendous job with them. And the buyer said to us, why don't you make a few junior petite coats? They
Ellie Hummer?
Huh?
Is that Ellie Hummer?
No. No.
Doesn't matter, I just...
No. And we thought about it, and one of the buyer's husband was a designer in dresses, and he wanted to do some part-time moonlighting. So we took him for 2 days a week, and he came in and he designed 4 styles in junior petite coats. We took the measurements from the dresses, you know, proportion, and we got the proper proportions, and we came out with 4 coats. And needless to say, every buyer came in, every buying office came in to jump on that junior petite coat because they didn't need any alterations. And that was the beginning of our coat business in Braetan. And that's how we started in the coat business. So we made an impact in coats. And then we still continued in suits, of course, and tried all kinds of different dressy suits, and tailored suits, and sports suits, and we tried to follow the sportswear market, you know, within reason. But of course, we lined everything and we made them look like suits. And we made money the first year in business. We were lucky, we made money the first year in business.
That's unusual.
Of course, the Chase Manhattan Bank, who handled our account previously for the last 50, 60 years, continued to extend the credit to us because they knew that we could produce, that we were self-productive. Each partner was self-productive, so that they continued to give us credit. And we continued. Of course, we were undercapitalized, but needless to say, we made it. We stayed in it, and we continued, and we went from items to items to items, and until we built it up in Braetan. And Ken Merritt, the fellow who who made the junior petites originally, stayed with us for 11 years. And he became famous because he was a very good coat designer. And he stayed with us, and we got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then we bought out one partner. After 3 years, we bought out the first partner. And
when you say we, you mean 3 of you bought out the 4th?
3 of us bought the 4th, yes. We paid him out. And then 3 years ago, we paid out the production partner. And last year, they paid me out. In the process, I'm a consultant, or whatever you call it, for 3 years.
It seems to me that we haven't mentioned Braefair.
Well, what happened, after we were in juniors, we felt it would be a wonderful idea to go into Missy contemporary.
Coats or suits?
Coats. We started with coats. And we took the derivative of B-R-A-E, Bray, and we added on Fair, Braefair, as Missy. And we put in raincoats, and we made it Braetogs, B-R-A-E-T-O-G-S.
Ah, does that continue today?
Braetogs. No, we sell today, we ship the raincoats on the Braetan and Braefair. There's too many companies.
Depending on whether it's junior or Mrs.
Oh, Mrs., right. And I'm thinking.
When did your son come in, or your nephew come into the business?
Well, my son came into the business after he graduated college, about after the Army. I would say 20 years ago would be 60,
62, thereabouts.
Yeah, thereabouts, yeah.
And
the nephew came in about 15 years ago.
About 67 then, perhaps. Are they both still in the business?
Oh, yes, they're partners now. And what we did for them is we opened up a Charisma line, a label Charisma, K-A-R-I-Z-M-A, on Popular Price coats and juniors. And they opened up on West 37th Street, a separate showroom and everything else, and they stayed there for 7 years. And then, as I realized I was getting older, and my brother was getting a little older, we decided to bring the boys in so they could become part of the business. So we took Charisma and put it back in the Braetan showroom, and we still ran this company, but they also became interested in Braetan and helped us with Braetan, and gradually took over the responsibilities of Braetan. So now they handle Braetan themselves.
I didn't know if you...
No, I'll get to it. Now, we were very fortunate that, is it on?
Yeah.
That the two boys took to the business very strongly and did exceptionally well. They both were selling, and Bobby Rubinstein, who's my brother's son, became excellent in the production end of it too.
Yes, because you always need an inside man.
Excellent. So he would work with our production partner, and he was learning that aspect. And my son was becoming a top salesman in the showroom. So it worked out just great. And now we do, well, I think about 18 million.
Still is a privately held company.
Still a privately held company, and my brother is the president now, and Arthur is the vice president, and Bobby is the secretary treasurer, and they're doing very well. And now we've gone into, in the last few years, we've gone into a big import program in addition to our domestic program. See, we make all our wool coats here in the United States, but our imports are items. Now, we jump on items. Whatever we feel that coats is not just coats per se. Coats is an outerwear garment. Whatever is outerwear, whether it's a sweater outerwear with buttons like a jacket, or a poplin jacket, or a rain jacket, or any type thing like that, or leather jacket, anything that's outerwear, we have adopted. And of course, the same buyer can buy it, but it gives you a chance for more volume, and you're hitting the same buyer, and it's the same sell. So it's worked out very well, and since we've gone into this diversification program, we've increased our volume. Now, when we first went in, we were the first one to go into the sweater operation of outerwear sweater. We started that. And how did we get into it? We made a sweater. Carol Cohn took over where Ken Merritt left. And she was excellent at making up outerwear sweaters. And we dyed a mouton, the color of the sweater. Rust on rust, green on green. It was a shawl collar, and it was just beautiful. And it walked out of all the stores. And that was the beginning of our division in the sweaters, which we ran in Braetan. And then we put them also in Braefair, you know.
Yeah, right.
Once something went over big in Braetan, or vice versa, we'd adopt it. So that
Because they were dealing with two different
two
departments.
different buyers, two different
These are
departments, two different departments, and it gave you more volume. So we had the sweaters, and we had the raincoats, and then we made zip-out raincoats, and then we started to make quilts. We were one of the first.
Right, yes. Tell
We
me
were one
about
of the
quilts.
first. When Carol Cohn made quilts, we were one of the first in the market to make quilts. We made it up especially for Ann Taylor, because they were that kind of a store. They were quick on the contemporary look, and it started to go over very big. And
Did you make them here or in the Orient?
we made them here at the time, and then later on we imported them. But when we first started, we made them here. But then when the competition came in order to meet the competition, you had to import them, or you couldn't meet the prices. And what I'm trying to stress is the fact that in order to remain in business, in the coat and suit business, you must diversify. And you must make anything that the woman can wear as an outerwear garment. And that's the basis of the success of the organization. And we're very fast in jumping on new ideas. We are receptive to anything that the buyers would tell us or what we would see. We go to the Far East, we go to Europe, we go to Italy, Milan, Paris, London, you know, wherever it's possible to pick up something that would be adaptable for our business, we go there.
Would you, oh dear, oh, it's still on there. Would you mention a little bit about the Adolfo operation?
Well, actually, I'm not as well acquainted with it as my brother would be because it started in 1981, which was last year, and I had left the firm. But my brother was the one that made the contact and worked out a deal with Adolfo. And we call it Adolfo 2.
Have you started to ship any of that yet?
Oh, we shipped last year.
Oh, you did?
Oh,
Okay.
sure. The stores did very well. We shipped last year, and we're showing this year. So it's a beautiful line to. This phase has become popular in the couture departments throughout the store, throughout the department stores in the country. And
do you know the wholesale price?
Yes, we're
price
about
range?
160 to about 285 wholesale. Yeah. So that's the crux of it. And we have a special showroom for it. And a special woman, who was a lovely woman, Peg, I don't know if you know her from Aquascutum. She used to run Aquascutum. She's running the show. And so now we have Adolfo 2, we have Braefair, we have Braetan, and we have Cruz. And the boys are doing an excellent job. My brother is a very, very capable man. And the two young fellows are holding up right with him. So I think their future looks very good to me, and I feel proud about it because I more or less started them off and got them all into it.
That leads to one of a number of interesting subjects I'd like to get your feeling about.
Of course, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the process.
That's for sure. That's
all
always
right?
true, yes.
I've skipped over plenty of things, but I thought I'd give you a brief outline.
I would like to know.
And we sell, by the way, we sell the best stores in the country. The best in every city. So we've been accepted, and
yeah, right.
it's a real prestige line.
Since this is a history of you and of your business, I'm really interested in knowing your opinion on a number of subjects. For example, do you think that this market still has room in it for people like yourself who are entrepreneurs who run, even though it's an $18 million business, it's a relatively small business
compared to the
of,
giants.
Yeah.
Compared
Right.
to the giants.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we've been approached a number of times by the big giants for merger and things like that. But they're very apprehensive about merging with coat people. They'll merge with sportswear people, and they'll merge with dress people. But when it comes to coat and suit people, they're very cautious.
But from your point of view, would that be of interest?
Well, if you get the right proposition, why not? But you see, coat and suit people have it's like a graph. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. There's never a stable period. There's never a stable period. It just has its high point and low point. And it's very difficult.
Except that you have learned to diversify.
But we have learned to diversify, and we've learned to survive, and we've made money. So that's the crux of it. That's the important part of it. And many of the coat people have gone out of business. Many good people have gone out of business. Many raincoat people have gone out of business. But I think the basis for our success is the fact that we're so receptive to new ideas. We're not afraid to do it.
Yeah, well, one of the things I have heard about over and over again is that the firms which are entrepreneurial can jump onto new ideas and new thoughts and new trends quickly,
Yeah.
which is something that the big conglomerates can't always do.
Well, I don't know how they really operate, the conglomerates. I don't know. I know the problem has been with big conglomerates is that they get the wrong management. You see, when you take over a firm of our type and you try to manage us without letting us manage it, you're going to lose because they can't cope with it. Now,
Why do you think that is?
Well, a good example is Genesco with Susan Thomas.
Oh, I can give you lots of examples.
With Majestic.
Yeah,
with,
right.
I can go on with all those companies that were very successful.
Yes.
As soon as they came in and gave their own management and knocked out their management team, they were out of business. So I say, if they were to do that to us, they would not survive. We know our business.
Yeah, right. I guess I'm asking you the tough question of why do you think that is?
I don't think that they understand the trials and tribulations of a business such as ours. They're used to big business. The giants are used to big business. Now, some of them are smart. If they take over a company and they got good management, they leave them there. They leave them alone. They don't even bother them.